everyone. Long time no speak. Well, it's not that long. It's been about a month. But I'm back for another podcast today. And so I just saw this video on TikTok of this girl talking about how... I don't know if this is going to be necessarily addressed more to women, but I feel like I kind of... The way... I mean, I am a female, so I took it this way. And it was basically saying about how in a society that constantly profits off youth and beauty and femininity, to not let insecurities get to you, and to kind of always realise that the things that we are conditioned to think about ourselves is just a form of brainwashing, and almost how, like, damaging this is upon our mental state. And I feel like I haven't spoken recently enough about how these things affect us. And I kind of wanted to speak about, this is very spur of the moment, so I don't really know the direction this podcast is going to go. But I kind of wanted to speak about the ways that, like, we are conditioned to think about things that really shouldn't be an issue, and almost maybe how to start, like, rewiring your brain back into sort of more self-acceptance, I guess. I think we are very, as a society, prone to the visual and the physical, and a big part of my philosophy as a spiritualist is sort of looking beyond what's right in front of you and looking more towards the parts of yourself that make you who you are, that aren't necessarily as obvious as you'd initially think. So some examples of that are your morals and the things that you do when no one is around. Or I don't know if anyone's heard of, like, the shopping trolley theory, and it's basically like, if there's no one around in an empty shopping car park, would you take your trolley back or would you leave it there? And it's like a kind of morality test. Like, would you make someone's day a little bit easier when no one else is working? Like, visually, you can see them. Like, would you take it back? Would you help them out? Or would you just leave it there? And kind of those sort of things, like how you conduct yourself and how you behave just off your own merit without anyone else's input. And I think, like, I really struggle with this. I feel like I have a million different versions of myself, and I often feel like I am a different person around a lot of different groups of people. And I recorded a podcast with my friend Ro yesterday. It's coming out at some point, probably either today or tomorrow, whenever. I mean, I don't know when you guys are listening to this, but it'll probably be out at some point. And we were saying about how you kind of are the people that you're around and the people that you immerse yourself with, and how much sort of influence you take from your surroundings. And I guess if we're talking, like, nature nurture debate, like, I grew up with my mum being, like, the primary caregiver. I didn't live with my dad, and my mum's very calm and very chilled and doesn't like confrontation. She doesn't really, like, do much. Like, she's just chilling. She goes for her swims. She, like, works her job, you know, takes the dog for a walk. She's very, like, passive throughout life. And I grew up being very, like, rushed and very go, go, go. Kind of, I wanted to do things all the time. And I know for a fact that I've taken that sort of influence from my dad. Even though I never grew up with my dad, I never really had my dad's influence in me. But I guess that's the more nature side of it, is although I never grew up with his influence, I took a lot of his traits, I guess, like, medically. I don't know if you'd call it medically, but that's the nature side of the debate, is that even though I never grew up with this man, I share so many of the same, like, he's very, very active, I guess, if you look at the active and passive debate. And I'm also very active. Not to say that my mum's not an active person, but in terms of, like, doing things, she's very much, I'll do it as and when, whereas I think my dad was very much like, must be done now. And I think that's probably the ADHD side of my brain that kind of has that in it. But it's very evident to me that sort of as I've grown up, when I was younger, I had a lot of my dad's influence, even though I didn't grow up with him. But as I've got older, I've developed more sort of my mum's side of things, with the being in tune with things and like being slower with your day and like taking your time with things. And I kind of feel like the nature nurture debate kind of stops around childhood. Like maybe when you get into your teenage years, you don't necessarily see it as much. But I kind of feel like the older you get and the less influence your parents have on you, you realise how much your parents have influenced you as you get into sort of your late teens, early 20s. I'm 21 now, and I would say I'm the spit of my mum. I mean, I still have my dad's like fire in me. He's a very fiery person, so am I. But it's like, I feel like I almost feel like, obviously, as you get older, you stop spending time with your parents as much. You have work and you have other friends and commitments, and you realise that you take so much from people throughout your life, and it sort of builds who you are and shapes who you are. And it comes out when you're not around them. Like, I don't know if anyone has friends that are the spit of their parents. Like, I know quite a lot of friends that have like kind of almost rocky relationships with their parents, or they don't get on with their parents very well, but they have so many of the same attributes as their parents that they wouldn't necessarily like to admit. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. So say for example, if they grew up with parents that had very little empathy or understanding for what they were going through, they've never really been taught to appreciate empathy. And that's not saying that they can't possess empathy, but it's kind of this idea of, because they didn't grow up experiencing that, they then have a hard time empathizing with friends about things that they haven't necessarily understood or been through themselves. And it's almost like a skill that they need to learn, because it's like they never learn it around their parents, so they have to learn it around friends. And I think that's when like issues come up surrounding friendships and relationships as you get older and you move throughout life, because you kind of see what your friends have that you lack. So like, I know, for example, I lack majorly a sense of community. I've spoken about this with in like drum and bass podcasts before, that I didn't grow up with a huge sense of community around me. I grew up as an only child. I didn't grow up in a huge family. I was never part of like groups or clubs or societies, really. I never really like kind of got into that. I'm very much like, I like to do my own thing, and I don't really like being told what to do. And that's definitely caused me issues growing up, because I don't know, it's like an only child thing, but like there's this like really common thing with only children, that they really struggle to like share or understand other people's perspectives, because they've always just done what they want and they've not had to like make allowances for other people. And that I feel like comes out when you start going to school, or you start going, like, as you develop throughout life, you realize that there's like traits that other people possess so naturally that you never learn. And it can be very confusing. And I guess circling back to my first initial point about how we're constantly being profited off, I mean, this doesn't just go for females at this point, this goes for any gender orientation, whatever you consider yourself as. I feel like there is a base type of person that is accepted throughout society, whether that be like the cisgender, stereotypically pretty or attractive person that has good morals and good understandings of things. And this is really just a framework that is quite backwards, I find. I don't think there should be this one identity that we should all strive to be. Say, for example, the finance bro, like, hustling mindset of, like, think Fight Club. Like, he's like, he got the life that he wanted, he got the hustle, he got the apartment he wanted, and it was just still not enough. And I was having a chat with someone the other day about Fight Club, and we were talking about what do you think it means to you? And he was saying about how he thinks that the whole point is that you need to you need to have something else, and you're always going to kind of go back to your like primal instincts and your primal urges, and that no, like even when you get to the top, it's never going to like quite be enough. And I kind of really understood that I don't know if I'm sure some of you, if not most of you, have seen Fight Club. If not, you should watch it. It's a really good film. But I kind of took from it that no matter how much you have in terms of what should be expected of you, get the job, get the apartment, like live the life, there's still these like primal urges and these primal instincts that we carry with us. I mean, like, we're afraid of snakes and spiders for primal reasons, for protection reasons, you know? We don't have any reason really these days to be afraid of snakes and spiders because we have so much knowledge of them. We have all these preventative methods, you know? We don't typically go out wearing so little clothes that they could like hurt us the way that they used to, you know, in these olden days. And it's kind of, I think we don't really realize how much of our primitive instincts are still inside of us. And I think spirituality really, really comes into this, especially when looking at the physical versus the spiritual, is that although we do the graft and we go to work and we see our friends and we do all the things that are expected of us in this 3D material world, in this capitalist society, everyone's still kind of depressed and everyone's still upset and everyone's still angry and people don't feel fulfilled and they don't feel happy or like they belong somewhere, even though visually they have everything they need. Like visually, to an outsider's opinion, they have the perfect life. But so why is it still not enough, you know? And like I was saying at the start of this podcast about how we are profited off based on our visual, there's so much more that goes into it. Like one thing that I've really liked that I've taken from spirituality is like physically understanding how to move your body or how to navigate how your body feels. I listened to this podcast on trauma release while I was on holiday, and it was basically saying that all trauma is stored in your hips and you have these muscles that run through your hips and connect to your legs. I can't remember what the muscles are called. Huge, thick, long muscles, and they hold your trauma. Like metaphysically, they hold your trauma, and if you don't let your trauma pass through or like release, these muscles become tight and weak and don't work properly, which explains it, like explosive blowouts and arguments and all these things, because your body doesn't actually know how to deal with this, even though it's a thing that's like hardwired into our brains through a primitive sense. The podcast was saying about how, if I can find it, I'll link it because it was really good and it's going to explain it so much better than I am, because we know that I can't explain things scientifically. I just explain them word of mouth and it doesn't always come out the best way. But yeah, it was saying that if you look at an animal that has just had to run from like a predator, they will instantly start shaking. Like they'll curl up into a ball and start shaking once they're at a safe space. And I don't know if anyone, I mean, I've been experiencing this a lot recently. I find that when I talk about trauma or talk about something really sensitive to me, my hips start shaking. And it used to happen a lot as a kid. And I used to be like, what's going on? Why am I shaking from the hips, like violently? And I think that is genuinely like the like my primitive states my body's way of like recalibrating itself, and it's really healthy. But because as a society we're not taught about this, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you shaking? Like, I don't know if you've ever like spoken to someone who's really upset or feels really scared or has gone through something and they start like shaking. That is their body's way of releasing emotion. Emotion is a form of energy, and energy, like any type of energy ever, gets stored in one way or another, and it needs to release, you know? Energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transmuted. Sorry, I feel like my science teacher, but energy is always going to be there, you know? So we pick up energy and we release energy throughout the day. A really good way of explaining it is tears. And tears are a very physical manifestation of energy coming out. One of my really good friends, Joe, was saying that he struggles to cry, but he always feels like this pent up feeling of like not knowing how to release his emotions. And it's like, I think a lot of men are never taught how to cry and how to process emotions. I've got a podcast on why men aren't taught to process emotions. I definitely do. At some point, I can't remember the name of it. Sorry, I've got so many podcasts, but he kind of made a real good point of feeling like he was never allowed to express himself in that way, so now he just doesn't know how to, which is kind of upsetting to hear, because everyone, regardless of, I don't think gender or sexuality or like race or religion or anything should influence how you learn to express your feelings. I don't think feelings are gender specific or anything like that. I think everyone should have the same understanding of how to process things. And I mean, I think canalization comes into this. I speak about canalization quite a lot. If anyone doesn't know, it's basically how from even before birth, you're assigned to a stereotype. So it's like, imagine like two babies floating down a canal, and one canal is the female, one's the male, and the baby will go down either one. And so it's like with males, they will be shaken about as a kid, or they'll be like zoomed about, and females will be more like taken care of gently and whatever. And then that's why like men are more comfortable fighting and being aggressive and being angry and like letting, like, you know, like being more physically expressive, whereas females are more, I guess, the emotional. I'm air quoting, as you can't see right now, but I'm air quoting. This is what I mean by canalization. Is we're taught to express ourselves in very different ways, and I think this is where the trans debate comes in. Is that I think people see trans people or the trans community as a big old question mark, because it threatens everything that they know about how men and women in society should behave, because trans people defy all of those boundaries, and they confuse people, because they think, well, men should behave this way and women should behave this way, so how should trans people behave? You know, it's this black and white. The trans is the grey in the middle in terms of human behaviour and human psychology. Of it threatens people. And I think that's one thing that I love about the trans community, is that they don't have boundaries and they don't have regulations on how they're supposed to behave. They can take from feminine aspects and they can take from the masculine, and it's not so restrictive. And I mean, change is always uncomfortable, and one thing I really love about the trans debate is that they can basically do whatever the fuck they want. I know they have so many restrictions placed upon them, and so many, like, what's the right word? Like inequalities, especially in America and probably other places in the world, even in the UK. I'm not going to lie, it's terrible. I mean, I'm not part of that community, so I've never experienced what they go through, but I see things online, you know, activist posts and stuff, and it's really hard to watch. But I think it's very similar to if you look at when there was a lot of civil rights movements going on, and Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. These people weren't given the same opportunities, and they had to create this uncomfortable change for things to become different. And we wouldn't be where we are progressively today without those events occurring. Not that I think people should have died and been shot and been put in prison for just expressing their right to behave however they want, but I feel like the trans movement is a real modern day example of that still happening. You know, people don't like that it makes them uncomfortable, even though it's literally nothing to do with them, you know. And I think, just shout out to the trans community real quick, because like they're really doing God's work right now for breaking these gender norms and these gender boundaries of what is expected of us. And it's really, change is like a really difficult one, because we're so set in our ways. And I think you get to like sort of 12, 13, and you have been socialized in a way to treat people as the way that you have been treated. Sorry, that grammar was kind of off there, but people you see people as the way that you've been treated. And that's why, like, when I speak to my friends quite a lot about like trauma and stuff, and they say like, oh, you can't do that, or we can't do that, or whatever, and I'm like, why not? And they're like, because of this. And it's like, but I've never had that experience, so why would I think that would happen to me? Like said in the podcast with Ro, I am going to put this podcast out, so listen to it. I'm not going to just keep reiterating points that I've made, but me and Ro were saying about how we both have really severe car trauma, and one of our friends was saying, like, it's really hard being in a car with you because it feels like you guys not overreact, but you like get really stressed, and it's like, I don't want to make you guys feel that way. And it was like, but that's just because of our pre-existing trauma, you know? Say if someone's been sexually assaulted, they are always going to have a fear towards that category of person that sexually assaulted them, not because they're racist or sexist or homophobic or anything, but if you get bitten by a type of spider and you see that type of spider again, you're going to run away from it. It goes back to that primitive instinct. Sorry, I was thinking of insects. I'm aware I'm talking really quick again. Sorry, I'm going to try and slow myself down. But yeah, it goes back to that primitive instinct of protection and feeling safe. And I think in a society like today, where we're constantly being pushed to new places and to try new things and to do new things, and there's so many people in the world that live so many different lives, that we need to understand more of a collective view. And I think that's one thing that, I mean, I know they're trying to ban TikTok, but one thing that TikTok has really done for us is allowed us to understand that every single person on this planet is living just in depth of a life as we are. And I think it makes us more courteous. And I'm really grateful for it as a platform. I think there's a lot of misinformation and there's a lot of downsides, but it really has opened us up to the intricacies of other people's lives and experiences. And we don't just get this one media narrative of things are this way, believe it, you know, which I think is really, really positive. My brain's shut off now, so I'm going to stop there. But thank you guys so much for listening and being patient with me, because my content is not as frequent as it used to be. But I'm really, really grateful, and I really appreciate everything that you guys do in terms of listening and following and sharing, and it means the world, expressing gratitude for that. So thank you guys so much, and I will speak to you guys soon.